So, hey everyone, what's up? Today we're going to eliminate team drama with Joe Mull. So let me read a little about Joe because this is a fun bio here. He's the founder and president of Joe Mull and Associates, where he works at organizations that need their leaders to become better bosses. That would be just about every organization I've ever been part of. So he designs and delivers captivating learning experiences that give leaders the skills and tools they need to navigate the people management challenges they face every day. He's been training more than 20 years. He's been all over the place. And this is his latest book, not his only book, his latest book, No More Team Drama, Ending the Gossip, Cliques, and Other Crap that Damage Workplace Teams. So with that, what the crap, Joe? How are you?
I am great, sir. How are you today?
Excellent. So anybody who includes crap in their title, like my buddy Chip Lutz is all about crap, Jeff Cordes is about crap, and now Joe Mull's about crap. So why crap, dude? What does crap mean to you and the organizations that you work with?
Well, when I go into teams or work with leaders and I ask them to talk about the problems they face with group cohesion, with teamwork, with team spirit, if you will, the list of answers is long and diverse. And when we say, what does that all amount to? How do we label that? It is crap. It's the stuff that gets in the way of teams being productive, and it's the stuff that tends to devour the time and attention and energy of those leaders on the ground who have to deal with it, and the folks who come to work every day who are actually committed to doing a good job.
Oh, yeah. So lots and lots of crap at the top, crap at the bottom, crap in the middle. Often. Isn't that how we deliver performance reviews, Joe? Isn't it supposed to be a crap sandwich?
It's supposed to be, yes. I've heard it, another four-letter word used to describe that kind of good compliment. Here's what I really want to say to you. Here's the other good compliment to diffuse the tension and make that easier to swallow. But yeah, that happens pretty regularly.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. Let's just talk about that and then we'll dive into the book here. But does that really work, Joe? I mean, is a crap sandwich like, hey, Joe, I really like the fact that you came to us live from Norwalk, Connecticut. By the way, dude, your performance is wildly inconsistent. You play like the Steelers. And by the way, Joe, the fact that you have teeth, that's incredible, dude. So does that really work? I mean, is that really an effective way to give feedback?
Typically, no, but the problem necessarily isn't with the delivery. The problem's with the relationship that has or has not been formed prior to that conversation. Typically, the most successful and effective leaders have spent time earning the trust and respect of their staff so that when they do have to sit across from them and ask them to show up in a different way, they don't have to couch it with these kinds of qualifiers on the front end and on the back end. It's a little easier to swallow for the person sitting across from them, and it's a much more authentic conversation if that relationship is in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So that takes time, right? That doesn't happen overnight. That's a relationship, as you said. It's not a transaction. We need to remember that as we get, as we're getting close to year end here, a lot of leaders might be listening to this and thinking, boy, this is going to be the most dramatic time of my year. I've got 5 or 6 weeks to go before the end of the year. So let's pretend that we've fast forwarded here, Joe, and January 2. Because January 1, we're going to be watching college football games. January 2, we start the year off straight. Mm-hmm. How do we start building that relationship so that we can get no more drama at work?
Right. Well, I would love to give you the pithy one-sentence answer, but leadership and the relationships we have to build with those who report to us are complex. There's a fairly sophisticated set of emotional and psychological requirements that employees have in the workplace in order to give their all, to care and try and be the best that they can be. We know that they need their leaders to, for example, to give them influence and to allow them to use their talent. We know that leaders need to give their employees the equipment and materials and resources they need to do their jobs. We know that leaders need to share the information that employees need to do their jobs. We know that leaders need to care about the person inside the employee and not just view it as a command and control environment, but recognize that people are people and that the things happening in their lives outside of work influence who they are and how they show up at work. The simplest answer that I can give you is that a leader who shows up every day and puts their energies into creating the conditions necessary for employees to thrive is going to start to earn that trust and respect over time.
Awesome. I know that's not pithy, but I would say your one sentence answer there really, Joe, is get started understanding what those conditions are on January 2nd so you can start building those.
Right. And some of that is a development piece for the leader, right? We don't have to rack our brains to understand what those conditions are. There's a lot of really smart social science research and organizational development research out there that tells us what those psychological needs are for employees and what those conditions are that leaders need to create. So they don't need to sit at their desk and tap their fingers and go, what should I be doing? If we read and if we plug into what effective leadership looks like and sounds like, we can map out a strategy to do that.
Yeah. That's great. So we don't have to rely on ourselves. We don't just have to ask questions and guess. We can certainly do the research, do the homework. So perhaps over the holiday, you can get to reading, folks. If you're thinking about this, get a copy of No More Team Drama and get started creating that environment that gets past all that crap. So Joe, I'm looking at the book, right? And there's lots of good stuff, but I really believe that cause creates effect. And one of your chapters, one of your sections really is all about cause. And you talk about telling the big story. Yeah. So what the heck does that mean, and why is that so important, Joe?
Sure. So big picture, one of the things that I really started looking at was, why do some work groups become high-performing, close-knit, collaborative teams, while others get mired in drama and dysfunction? And it has a lot to do with some unconscious biases that we all bring into the workplace every day. We're pretty hardwired to more favorably judge ourselves and more harshly judge others at the same time. I always ask the teams that I do training with, what do you assume about somebody who's late to work? And the answers that we get back are probably the things that you would say and that your viewers would say, which are, well, that person didn't plan well that morning, or they didn't move fast enough. All of the answers tend to be about this person was lazy or unprepared or unfocused, right? They didn't do what they needed to do to be where they needed to be when they needed to be there. But when you ask folks, what about when you're late to work? The answers we get back are very different, right? It's, well, those things happened, but I'm a good person and I work really hard and my teammates know that. And so it's forgivable, right? We rationalize it away. And so this is one of several biases we have. And the result is we come into the workplace more favorably judging ourselves, more harshly judging others. We all think on a scale of 1 to 10 that we're a 7. The problem is we think everybody else is a 4. And so when this kind of pattern of thinking walks through the door at the workplace every single day, it can lead to the gossip and the cliques and the other crap that we talked about. And so when I wrote the book, I looked to identify what are the things that teams need to get good at together to overcome that bias and to overcome that predictable pattern of thinking and reacting that is borne out by that. And so there are 4 things that we know tend to reduce that from happening and reduce team drama. They are courtesy, camaraderie, conflict, and cause. Cause, which you asked about, is really about giving a team a purpose that is so worthy of their time and attention and effort that they can't help but rise above the other petty high school junk and noise that creeps into the workplace. We know that teams are capable of doing that. Every team that I talk to has told me that they've done that. Typically, teams have had something happen to them. There's been a glitch or a power outage, or somebody on the team has experienced a tragedy. And it made all of this other drama kind of fall away for a while, and everybody pitches in and rallies together. So we know that teams are capable of it, but wouldn't it be nice to not have to rely on triggers like glitches and mayhem or tragedy to elevate that level of performance? What if we instead gave teams something that is truly worthy of their time and attention and effort, that is almost romantic, that they are in pursuit of in the workplace? There's a lot of research out there about the role of purpose and the power of purpose in the workplace, and it's legit. It is absolutely a key component of getting people to be at their best and be the best version of themselves at work.
Wow. That's so interesting, right? We do, the whole noble cause. That's important, right? My friend Vance Brown from Sharewell Software talks about that. Really important stuff. But how do we have a noble cause if our employees are just, and I say just in air quotes, so if you're listening and not watching, folks know I'm not really saying just. I'm saying just, meaning some people feel that these positions are lower, right? So maybe a custodian, or maybe it's a building maintenance person or something like that. How do we give that team a noble cause, Joe? Yeah. I mean, they're just sweeping floors, man.
Sure, sure. Well, we have to create line of sight between even the most mundane tasks and responsibilities of someone's job and the difference that person makes in the lives of others. And so it's interesting that you brought up sweeping the floors, because there's a pretty famous and well-known story about NASA and about a film crew that went in there when NASA was first coming into public consciousness in the 50s to film and help people in America understand who NASA was and what they were all about. And so this film crew went around and started interviewing people and saying, what do you do? What's your job? And so they'd get in front of one person who would say, well, I'm a physicist. We're trying to set some things on fire and launch them into the air. And so I work on propulsion and inertia and all that stuff. Then they'd go to the next person and they'd say, what's your job? And this woman would say, well, I'm a doctor and we want to send living organisms into space at some point. And so I study the effects of travel and inertia and all the physics stuff on the human body. And on they went. And on their last day there, as they were getting ready to pack up, the cameraman noticed a janitor sweeping the floors in one of the hangars and pointed to the reporter and said, hey, we haven't talked to that guy. Do you want to go catch an interview really quickly? And the reporter said, sure, why not? And so they went over to this janitor and they turned on the camera and shined a light in his face. And they stuck the microphone in front of him and they said, so what do you do? And he paused and he leaned on his broom and he said, I'm putting a man on the moon. And so somebody somewhere had created that line of sight between going through the tasks and responsibilities of his job every day and how it led to something bigger. And so that can take a lot of hard work. That's what I mean in the book when I talk about that we have to tell better stories as leaders. We have to help the men and women who go to work every day see how doing this one little thing here resulted in this domino effect over here. And that is food for the soul, and we need to keep feeding it to employees at every level.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? Our goal, line of sight, and connect those dots for our people, because frankly, as a leader, often our job is to inspire others to do their job at a higher level. We have to help them be better at whatever it is they do. And that comes with having a bigger purpose. That's that noble cause we talked about. So that doesn't happen though, Joe, automatically. As you said, right? That does take, I think, one of the other C's, one of the biggest ones that often gets overlooked. It's not friendship, it's camaraderie, right? So what does camaraderie mean, and how does that show up in so many of our leaders, or not show up in our leaders and our leaders' teams?
Right. So camaraderie is the mutual trust and friendliness that develops between a group of people who spend a lot of time together. And we know that that tends to be one of the secret ingredients, typically, to overcome that voice in our head that tells us that, if I think I'm a 7, this other person is a 4. And the best example that I've come up with to illustrate this for the groups that I do training with is to ask you to imagine that you're driving home from work one night and that you come to a 4-way stop sign and everybody else is there too. All 4 spots are filled. And so you let this person go and then this person over here. And when it's your turn and you start to go, somebody who had been behind the last person goes tearing through the intersection and you have to jam on your brakes to avoid hitting them. Most people have a reaction at that moment, right? We throw up our hands or honk our horn, or we give them an internationally recognizable hand gesture, right?
You're number one. You're number one.
That's right. And sometimes we might even be behind that person for the next mile and kind of throwing our hands up because they can see you in that rear view mirror, right? Well, let's imagine that at the next stop sign, that person turns left. And there's that moment when they turn left where if you turn your head a little bit and they turn their head a little bit, you can see each other because of the windows facing each other. And let's imagine for a moment that after giving that internationally recognizable hand gesture and wildly gesticulating at this person for that mile, when they turn and they look at you, you see your pastor or your child's kindergarten teacher, right? There's that moment of shame, right? This is what social science researchers refer to as distance. The distance that we have in our relationships with others tends to influence how willing we are to regulate our behavior to more courteous and respectful interaction. When that driver was an unknown, we were allowed to be the worst version of ourselves. But when I cared about what that person thought of me, I was a little bit of a better version of myself. So this is what we have to do in the workplace. There's a reason that teams do potlucks and picnics and birthday parties and bridal showers, because we know if we can help members of teams get to know their teammates, beyond the tasks and responsibilities of their jobs. They access each other's humanity, and it results in a higher regulation of behavior. And what's really cool is that when you get to know somebody a little bit, you might start to like them a little bit. But even if you don't, there's a foundational layer of respect that will come in, so that if I screw up one day, instead of everybody getting mad and pointing at me or whispering about me in corners, it's far more likely they're going to stand next to me, put their arm around me and say, hey, good person having a bad day, let's get through this together. That's why camaraderie is a key ingredient to teamwork.
That's interesting. So familiarity doesn't breed contempt then, Joe? Because I've seen on teams sometimes where, that person we're so familiar that that we almost expect they're always going to be a 3.
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up. I feel like maybe you read the book, and if not, you're doing a great job, because there is kind of a curve, right? We can get to a high level of familiarity that helps influence the regulation of behavior, but then people who have been around each other too long, right? As the old MTV show used to say, people will stop being polite and start getting real, right? If I'm a child of the 90s, so that's a real world reference for anybody who's not.
TRL, baby.
That's right. and so camaraderie has to be developed in a multitude of ways. And one of those is closing the distance, just like we talked about. But for those teams where there's a high degree of familiarity, and which in turn sometimes gives us permission to go the other way, we actually have to tap into a sense of community that is deeper. We have to foster a sense of belonging, a sense of we're all in this together, and that the only way we're going to be successful is if I embrace my teammates, not physically embrace, because that'll get you sued in some places, but embrace the fact that I care about this person on my team because I feel a sense of camaraderie with them and a sense of wanting to be a part of something with them. And so we have to condition our employees to do this. Sports teams are really good at this. In the book, I write about the NFL draft. And one of my favorite parts of the NFL draft is watching the Twitter scroll that goes across the bottom, because oftentimes when a player gets drafted, you will immediately see their new teammates tweet out, hey, man, so excited you're a part of the team, ready to get after it with you. And in many cases, those folks don't even know each other. But these folks have been so conditioned to believe and understand that their success is entirely about their willingness to get along, to support each other, and push each other to be the best that they can be. And so we need our leaders in workplaces to do the same thing, to constantly be challenging teammates that the unhealthy conflict that people often pursue not only does harm to the other person, but it does harm to them and to the team as well.
Wow. I think that's really interesting that you just said that, and really an important point. So folks, if you're listening to that, recognize that conflict can harm you, not just the person in conflict. So if you're one of those people that likes to start the crap, know that you're hurting yourself too, which is a really interesting point. Now, along that though, as we flip back to leadership here, Joe, the whole positive to negative feedback thing, right? Is that an important component of team drama as well?
Well, we have to teach members of teams how to give feedback to each other, right? We have to teach them how to give it and how to receive it. And it seems absurd that we would have to teach adults how to have constructive feedback conversations with each other. But it's true, we actually have to do that. We have to teach members of our teams that if they're frustrated or bothered by something that somebody else on the team said or did, that yes, the very first most important step typically is for them to go right to that person instead of bringing other people into that conversation. But then we need to help them understand the difference between an emotional reaction and a thoughtful response. And so I often advise teams, if you're mad, if you're pissed, if you're raging, then that's not the time to have that conversation. We need to take a breath and buy some time for that to kind of unfold so that we can be more intentional. And then we have to give them some scripts and some tools and techniques to use to have that conversation, to sit across from that person and say in a calm manner that doesn't assume malice on the other person's part, right? Where we assume good intent. To say to that person, hey, I got this email from you the other day. It really bothered me. I felt attacked, and I want to understand where it was coming from. Can we talk about that? And those are the kinds of helpful approaches that we need to teach people in the workplace. But there's another side to that. I actually just did a YouTube video on this for my channel about how to receive feedback. And really the key to receiving feedback well is to treat it like a lousy Christmas present. Right? If you've ever gotten a lousy Christmas present, you're opening the paper there on Christmas morning in front of your in-laws, right? And you tear the paper away and you end up seeing something in front of you that makes you go, what?
So we just pick it up and we throw it in the garbage, right? That's
right.
How we deal with those.
But most
punch grandma in the face.
Right. Yeah, that would make for an interesting holiday meal, I think.
That's what we did. So that I guess we're messed up.
Well, then we probably have some work to do, Phil. We have some work to do.
Awesome. Therapy begins soon.
That's right. But in that circumstance, is that what we do? Do we say, what planet are you from, man? This is not an appropriate gift for me. This is crap. We don't do that. We say thank you. And we do that because that relationship is important to us and we understand the intent of that gift. And so we have to do the same thing with feedback. So when we hear something from someone that maybe we don't agree with or we think is absurd, then saying, okay, restating what you heard. So what I hear you saying is A, B, C, and then thanking them and saying, thanks for bringing this to me. And if you think it's absurd, then ask for some time to say, hey, I want to think about this. Is it okay if I circle back to you in a couple hours or tomorrow so we could talk more about that? I want to kind of let that cook a little bit. And most people will say yes. So even if you're hearing something from a coworker that you think is bananas, giving yourself that time and using those kinds of scripts can keep the conflict healthy.
That's good. So so don't immediately punch Graham in the face when she when she gives you those nasty socks that you don't want. Right. Instead, take some time, think about it. I like saying thank you to any feedback is so important. And I would say, it's even more important online with our folks, right? Because it's permanent. And because anything you type, someone is going to screenshot and use against you later. Yep. So take the time to think about that feedback. Thank you is a complete sentence, much like no is.
Well, and that whole distance piece that we talked about before, where the person in the car in front of you is an unknown, that happens online every day. It's easy for me to direct all of my vitriol at somebody else who I don't know. I would not have that same kind of interaction with them if they were sitting across from me.
Yeah. That one of the things that I teach is when you're online, look people in the eyes. So pull up their profile, really look at their picture and look at them and think about, would I say this? Would I type this? Would I think this if they were sitting across the table from me or across the video screen like you are today, Joe?
Right. Oh, and for the record, if grandma gives you a Buccaneers jersey or Buccaneers tickets, probably okay to punch her in the face because that is a lousy gift. I mean,
that's pretty true. So, because grandma would know I'm really a Packers fan, even though I live in Tampa. So,
so you keep posting all your trips to the Tampa games, and we've been talking football for a while. So you threw me for a curve there.
I did. Well, see, that's on purpose because I don't want you to hurt my feelings talking about my stinky Packers. Right? That's really why, Joe.
In the long run, you're better served as a Packers fan than a Bucs fan.
That's true, though. Any game is a good game, if you ask me, man. True. So let's talk a little bit more kind of about the game and really the generational game, because part of what I like about your book about No More Team Drama is that there's a little piece in there actually from my friend Cara Soletto that I really like about generations. Do generations really matter, and how do we handle the difference in generations when it comes to camaraderie?
Yeah, no, great question. There are a whole host of factors that influence who we are in the workplace. And obviously our generational experiences are one of them, as are our race, our gender, our socioeconomic status, our family units, so many other things about who we are, both things that we're born with and as, and other things that we choose. And certainly generations are a part of that. What we know about the generations in the workplace is that it's not about a stereotype or a set of labels. It's really about understanding how the formative years for that generation influence how they show up in the workplace, what their values are, what their expectations are, and what their needs are. So it absolutely influences camaraderie. It influences all four of those aspects of team drama. The problem is that teams don't often set aside the time to understand those generational differences or any other kinds of differences between people in a more nuanced and sophisticated way. It's interesting that we're talking about this right now because I'm in Connecticut today because I'm doing a team retreat with one of my clients, and we're focusing on communication style and generational differences. And one of the things that I'm going to share with them is that if we reduce generational understanding to young people are lazy and old people are stuck in their ways, then we never can have a richer conversation about some of the differences that show themselves in the workplace. Because every critique that anyone has ever had about millennials are actually the same critiques that we had about baby boomers when they were kids, right? America has two favorite sports: overeating and criticizing youth, right? And so that whole after every keynote I give, I will have somebody come up and say, what about millennials? They're so lazy. They're so entitled. And I don't know what to do with my people. And that's bunk. It's one of those things that it just doesn't hold water typically. And so helping people understand, again, those unconscious biases that we have and the assumptions we make about others and how they inform our reactions to them is really a key part of teamwork.
Awesome. Totally agree, man. Totally agree. It's so important that we get some shared understanding first, so that we can move forward. Second, so if you're looking for a place to start by trying to understand the people you work with so that you can share some meaning together, create some camaraderie. Eventually, you'll get to where you need to be. So, Joe, if there's one more tip that you could give from your book, from No More Team Drama, what would the last tip be for folks?
So I think there's a question everybody should carry around in their pocket with them every single day of their lives. And if you commit yourself to asking yourself this question over and over again as often as possible, I really believe it can change your life. And that question is simply this: what would make an otherwise well-intentioned person act that way? If we can teach the members of our teams to ask this question when they're frustrated or bothered by something that somebody else said or did, they will move past the assumptions we have about people who are late to work, that they're lazy. Maybe there's a perfectly good reason that they were. If you go to a restaurant and you get bad service from a waiter, our initial reaction is that this is a lousy waiter, or that they don't care, or they're not invested. But if we stop and say, what if they're a good person and there's a perfectly good reason for them acting this way? You may stop and say to yourself, maybe they had a kid who was throwing up all night and they're working on 1 hour sleep today. And that's far more forgivable for me. That might not even be true. But by asking that question, I write a better story that makes me a more tolerant, compassionate, forgiving person and makes me a better teammate everywhere I go.
Wow. That's a powerful, powerful question, Joe. What would an otherwise well-intentioned person, what would cause them to act that way? Really good spot to end this up as folks are thinking about how do we stop, how do we reduce team drama. Folks, the book is No More Team Drama. If you go to nomoreteamdrama.com, Joe's got some great stuff there for you. You can get the book on Amazon. Joe, if people want to connect more with you, besides going to nomoreteamdrama.com, is there a favorite social channel or a way to contact you so they can get deeper connected with you?
Yeah, I love LinkedIn. I've certainly tried to put a lot of time into connecting with folks and building relationships there and sharing content. We publish a twice a month video in newsletter form that talks about all of these people management challenges that we face in the workplace. And we share a lot of that content there as well. So LinkedIn would be my first destination to which to point people to.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thanks a lot, man. So the book is No More Team Drama, Ending the Gossip, Cliques, and Other Crap That Damage Workplace Teams. Joe Mull is our author. You go to nomoreteamdrama.com, connect with Joe Mull on LinkedIn. And Joe, it's just a pleasure to have you today, buddy. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, man. I had a good time. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. Totally my pleasure. Folks, until next time, get yourself a copy of No More